Socialists teaming up to bring their message to the heartland. Senator Bernie Sanders is hitting the campaign trail in Kansas with the new face of big government liberalism.
You know, we must have gotten off at the wrong stop because people told me that Kansas was a Republican state. Doesn't look like that today. We are going to come together to transform this country politically and economically.
We want to be a nation that allows improved and expanded Medicare for all. We are a nation that will not stop until every child is born with the opportunity to go to college or trade school free of cost.
Meanwhile, Senator Elizabeth Warren is pushing the left's new fake news narrative about jobs.
When people are working at minimum wage jobs that won't support them, or they're working 2, 3, or 4 jobs to try to pay the rent and keep food on the table, then simply saying the unemployment figures have gone down just doesn't get you there.
What she forgot to mention is that the Trump economy is booming, and there are more jobs available than people to fill them. All right, Greg, let's start with Cortez teaming up with Bernie.
I love it.
I mean, this is a big threat to the Democrat establishment.
It's like you got the old communists, you got the new communists. It's like the Snoopy and Woodstock of socialism. Think about it. The greatest economic system known to mankind is the one that the Democratic Party is rejecting, despite evidence that it's worked to eliminate poverty and disease all over the world, wherever it's introduced. And yet they pick the one that, wherever it's introduced, destroys countries, Venezuela, Cuba, USSR before it became Russia, even cities in California, San Francisco, because of big government, is now the nation's restroom. You can have a seat anywhere, no flushing needed. So I think go for it all the way. And also, I think they're a great team. They're like a buddy cop show. They're like a buddy cop socialist show.
They do look good together, I have to admit. Juan, socialists aren't very good at math. Let's just be honest. I mean, she wants free college, free housing, free health care. Who is going to pay for all this?
Oh, gee, I wonder. Maybe it's the same people who are paying for the Trump tax cut that blew up the deficit. You think that could be, Jesse?
All funded by crumbs.
Oh, that's it. So in other words, it's okay when Trump blows up the deficit and spends a lot of money. But if you start taking care of us, the American people, and most Americans think we need some kind of Affordable Care Act. We should take care of people who have pre-existing conditions.
I thought we had an Affordable Care Act.
Who's trying to undo it?
Just wasn't affordable.
It's your side. It's your side. It's very affordable. By the way, Greg, we're not talking about communism. Is that what you said? Communism?
I will say they're communists, socialist communists. Tomato.
Well, I see. But what about the idea that we in the United States are a country that, in fact, puts in place taxes? We somewhat restrain unfettered capitalism, because guess what? You know, there's sometimes a need for a safety net.
Well, Bernie Sanders' style of socialism is communism. Let's not forget that he's the one who used to praise bread lines in South America as an example of how government is actually working for the people, as people are starving, standing in line, waiting for the little crumb, literally, that the government is going to give them. I love that Elizabeth Warren is trying to argue that, you know, people are trying to work 3 or 4 jobs just to earn a living, when Democrats and the socialists in their party have made it impossible for regular everyday Americans to make a living by implementing minimum wage laws, which have now turned places like McDonald's, where people get their first step in, into robotic institutions where you order from a machine rather than a teenager who can then go on and get a good job in life. They are also the same party who has implemented things like occupational licensing. You have to have a permit to be a child care specialist. You have to have a permit to pluck someone's eyebrows. They are the ones who make it impossible for people to actually go outside of the system and make the money that they want to make on their own. So in terms of regulation, Elizabeth Warren and the socialists are the ones who actually put workers down in this country and want to implement a socialist system that is bad for all of us. And by the way, this Medicare for All plan is not affordable, Juan. It's going to cost $32 trillion.
I see. And what did it
cost?
Impossible. What did it cost when they said, you know, too big to fail? We better bail out Wall Street. I think at that point,
has nothing to do with what I'm talking
about. That's exactly what we're talking about. You said it's too expensive to take care of Americans who are ill, and I don't think that's the case.
Nothing is free, and I want to take care of myself and my own family rather than everybody else.
I do know, Juan, that we want eyebrow pluckers to be able to pluck without
By the
Strangling
way,
regulations.
Jesse, you
Yes.
obviously didn't get your eyebrows. Those things are bushier than.
I know. We need definitely some pluckers on set. Molly, what do you think about Elizabeth Warren, though, trying not to get outflanked by Cortez? Now it's not just 2 jobs people are working, they're now working 4 jobs.
And soon it'll be 16 jobs
16
that people are
jobs.
working, and that explains the low unemployment rate.
Right.
But I really do think Democrats have a problem. All the excitement that they have is on this left side, this left flank. And you're hearing about people wanting Medicare for all. Never mind that that's not going to actually happen. I mean, Vermont, California, Maryland all had to abandon their Medicare for all programs because they were too expensive. And so will they still retain that excitement when things that they're pushing for don't happen? They had the vote this week to abolish ICE, and that didn't happen. So I'm not sure how to maintain that excitement that's there
Why
on the
did
base.
that happen? I think it was Republicans pulled the bill.
Oh, because Democrats voted against
They voted president on the bill or against it.
I
But the
see.
point being, it's not very popular on a national level. It's very popular in New York City, maybe, or Vermont. But are these the kind of messages that will actually pull nationally, or will they cause a lot of problems?
And you mentioned the crowd size, because it looks like a lot of people turned out for this, Greg, and we spoke yesterday about Biden running. I don't think Biden can turn out a crowd the way a Bernie Sanders could.
Well, it's tough because if you eliminate the big names or the wild cards or the charismatic people, they're versions of Trump. So you think about, like, Oprah's not going to run, Michelle Obama's not going to run, and Hillary, which I think would be the perfect rematch because I think that's a big story, but she probably won't. You're left with a remainders table at a drugstore. You know that discount table where you have, like, a travel shampoo and you have a deck of cards and you have a bottle of cough syrup that's past the expiration
right
date.
at the checkout line.
Yeah, it's right at the checkout
Yeah.
line, and it's like if you're drunk, you might buy something. That's the Democratic candidate. That's what they're going to have right now. And it's not. I don't think the reality is. I don't think you're going to see the candidate until 2019.
But I do think it's interesting that they are campaigning in deeply red states. Kansas was won by President Trump in 2016 by 20 points. However, as we've learned through special elections in the past year politically, you can't take any seat for granted, and every single vote counts. And let's not forget that a number of Bernie Sanders supporters then became Trump supporters. So they are targeting a certain sector of those voters, even in deep red districts, because they feel like you work at it, you can do it. Cortez is the one who won the election because her opponent wouldn't show up to the debates and wouldn't actually put in the work to win the election. So they're not taking it for granted.
Katie, let's celebrate this moment. We agree on something.
Oh my God! Agreement with Juan Williams.
We really do,
Mark
because
it down.
I think a lot, and I think Greg is in on this too, that a lot of the Bernie supporters on the far left actually are populist and very closely aligned with people who are Trump supporters on the far right. But I would say this, and to disagree with you, to keep our show going.
Of course.
I would say that if you look at something like the tax cut, the Trump tax cut, the idea was that that was going to be the big Republican message for the midterms. It has become a dud. It
But
doesn't work.
why?
And why doesn't it work? Because Americans say it hasn't raised their
Why
wages.
is Trump going for
It's put
tax
more
cut
money in the
2.0
pockets.
in the fall, Juan?
Yeah, because he's trying to fix it, Jesse. He
No,
there's nothing
realizes
there.
Let's
this
be
thing
clear.
is a dud, and
They're
it's
trying to
hurt.
cement it right
No.
on the eve of the midterm
people-
elections. That tells me they think it's working.
No,
One thing
because
that
the people,
drives-
hang on a second, the people in Kansas that you saw Sanders and Octavia Cortez speaking to are people who are saying, you know what, this hasn't worked for us. We put some faith in Trump. They put faith, in fact, their former
so
governor.
those were all
and it
Trump
hasn't worked.
supporters that showed
No,
up
I think
to the
there are a lot of the
Bernie rally.
populists. A
One
lot
thing,
of the,
one
I
thing
think
we
there
need
are a
to
lot of
point out, and
populists.
this drove the president crazy when the tax cuts were being implemented. It wasn't just a tax cut; it was a tax cut and jobs plan. So you can talk all about how you want about the tax cuts, but the jobs portion of this has been really important and much of the time ignored.
But
The
I don't
economy
think-
is
so
booming.
where is
There are
it?
more jobs now than we can actually fill due
Well,
to a skills gap.
what's
which we're
funny, though,
working on.
we've
it's
spent-
all about jobs and the tax cuts.
We spent an entire week screaming about how an outside foreign power is taking over this country, when actually the phone call is coming from inside the House. You have a party that's adopting policies of the history's worst disasters, and you have non-citizens who can now vote.
can you believe that in
which
San
is
Francisco?
which is an interesting thing, again, to
In
bring
your
up
city.
in my
In
city.
your city.
I am ashamed of San Francisco. More about the poop problem than the non-citizens voting, because I like to walk without having to step in anything.
Molly?
But that really is the real lesson of liberal governance. I mean, San Francisco is a great city that has had so much. This is like the place where more money has been earned than anywhere else in the country. And what do they have to show for it? This horrible homeless problem.
Right.
And all of the money in the world isn't saving it. So there really is an issue where liberal governance is not attracting as much as
I
conservative
wonder if we
governance.
could turn the camera to San Francisco and see all the fabulously rich people who are dying to buy a place because it's so expensive.
No, I agree. No, you're right, Juan.
Absolutely.
You're right, Juan.
Yeah.
And the mayor, the new mayor, admitted that there is a problem, and they asked what the solution is, and it was like, well, we're just going to talk to people. We're going to talk to people because that's going to get people off the streets and off doing drugs and whatnot.
But here's the thing that really, I think, supports your argument, which is that they spend, I think it's $37,000
Yeah.
on trying to deal with the homeless. But
Per
you and
homeless person.
Right. And you and I have argued about deinstitutionalization,
Right.
which didn't come from the Democrats, by the way. But the whole
started with them, but then Reagan agreed.
homelessness problem and the problem of people with, post-traumatic stress syndrome, or somehow they're destabilized, somehow maybe mentally incapacitated, is a big problem nationwide. But the big cities, especially the affluent big cities and affluent states that are more democratic, more compassionate, if you will, in terms of trying to take care of, they get besieged, and then you say, oh, these places are out of control.
But Juan, what does it tell
That's not
you
compassion.
about your governing philosophy when you have a statistic, $37,000 of taxpayer money spent per homeless person, yet the homeless crisis is raging in San Francisco? We had a similar statistic in Baltimore. They spend more money per pupil in the school districts in Baltimore than like almost any other city in this country, and they have the worst test scores.
Yeah.
Maybe spending a lot of money and throwing money at the problem doesn't always help.
Well, in one, let me just say, you and I happen to agree on things like, vouchers and charter schools and innovative ways to try to create better educational opportunities for children.
I think we're
in big
changing
cities.
Juan's position.
But
He's going to become a Trump voter.
But I got to tell you, on the homeless one, we still
Yes.
disagree, Jesse, because I don't think that we want to be Brazil and have homeless people in the street and say, well,
That's what it
their
is.
fault.
Have you seen the tent cities
No,
in LA?
we were talking about the idea. You spend money, you try to do something, Greg.
But it comes down to these liberal governments in Detroit, San Francisco, LA, Washington, D.C., punishing success in order to try and fix a problem that they have created by punishing that success.
How are you punishing?
I'm not a, they're
She's
punishing
speaking for other
success
people.
by
Oh, she's
punishing
speaking for others.
businesses. Like the tax in Seattle they wanted to put on for each employee that they had, they were going to charge $100 or something to take care of the homeless problem. You're punishing successful people to take care of liberal problems. And as we've seen that play out across the country.